Today we have the opportunity of meeting one of our younger French colleagues, Dory, at the Center of History and Epistemology of Geography in Paris. Danielle, you're not a really typical French geographer, but you have a very interesting background. I want to pose you some questions about that, why you are doing geography, and what is really going on at that center of yours.
Well, I'm not a really classical geographer. I think no more French than other, because I start as philosopher. My first training is in philosophy in Louvain in Belgium. After that, I moved to more concrete interest. And when I was finishing my philosophical studies, I tried to find some contact with empirical sciences. And I found sociology and anthropology. So I came to Paris to get a training in sociology first in the Sorbonne, and then in anthropology. At this time, I've been interested in Africa.
The years when you studied at Louvain and the years?
At the end of the 70s, and yes, 73 or 4, I don't remember exactly. Yes. And I came in France in 78, I think. And then I went in 81 for the first time in Africa to make the classical anthropological fieldwork in an ethnic group called the Lobis in Upper Volta. In this time it was Upper Volta, now it's Burkina Faso, and Ivory Coast. And then it was very difficult for me to understand what really was going on in this population. Partly because I am a very bad anthropologist and field worker, and part because I asked to me many puzzling questions. First, related with history. So I come back to the Sorbonne to make the lessons of history. Then I went again to Burkina Faso, and I didn't understand more or much more. And at this moment, I understood that the most important aspect was the relation of this population, and in general all the populations, with the environment, the natural milieu. And then I arrived in geography at the last moment. And there I trained also in the Sorbonne, and I meet Professor Pinchemel, who has influenced me very much, because his writings and his mode of thinking has many anthropological questions, arises many anthropological questions. So progressively I got some qualifications in physical geography, because it's mainly physical geography that interests me in geography, because having a sociological training before, I was not very interested to do again social geography, what I could do with my training before. So I arrived, in the 4 last years I work in Africa, and I collaborate with Professor Pinchemel in the Centre de Geohistoire, which is a mixed laboratory of the CNRS, the Center of Scientific Investigation in Paris, and the Universite Paris 1 Sorbonne. And the name of the team is Histoire et Epistemologie de la Géographie. And of course, I was interested in geography in the aim to resolve the problems that I had with my fieldwork, and I became interested to Professor Pinchemel because I was a philosopher to do epistemology.
Yes. But you say it is epistemology. Could you give me a more clear definition of how that word is construed in your context?
Well, there are a lot of contexts, and all the people who works in this center have their own vision of epistemology. depending of the basis, the philosophical basis, that the implicit or explicit that they have. For me, I am philosophically linked with the materialist dialectic stream. So epistemology is the part of philosophy which tries to understand how science functions, not only in the inner aspects, which are important, of course, is the argumentation, logics, but also in the social conditions. And these social conditions send us to analyze concrete societies. And epistemology is first the structure, the inner structure of the geographical language, the geographical form of thought, but also the relation, which is, in my opinion, most explicative, of one kind of geographical thing in other relations with other sciences, because there is no legitimacy for one field. For me, geography is an empirical fact, not the result of a theoretical process, only conjunctural in the historical process that we are living now. So epistemology is making the two operations. Is first logically the analysis of the construction of argumentation and the proof, searching laws if there are regularities, and at the other side to explain the relation between a kind of knowledge, the history of the time, and the social conditions.
How much of the philosophical training, of the Louvain philosophical training, have you found useful in your epistemological work?
Very few.
Very little?
Very little. Mm-hmm. Because Louvain is a Catholic university.
So?
And what is my native language in philosophy is Marxism. So I learned a lot of things about general philosophy, history of philosophy, theology, logics. Logics was very important, and that was very good training there. But in what are the main aspects of philosophical thought, I think I am rather autodidact, with the exception of the professor there, whose name is Jean Ladrière, who accepted to rule my maîtrise about Engels. And there I got much help with him, because we could discuss about several problems which were not very discussed in this time in the university. So, well, I think a lot of geographers and also philosophers making epistemology now have learned a lot by their own, because science progresses so fast, and the level of adjustment from the theory to the empirical reality, which is the epistemological problem, implies that we are recycling all time.
Yes. But you have not just your philosophical interest. I know your empirical part is still very much alive and curious about, for example, problems in Africa of hazards and drought. I read in your paper that you didn't exactly like the word hazard. That is what is used mostly in the English-speaking literature. Would you like to develop a little of that?
Yes. Well, the concern about hazards arise from my empirical experience of fieldwork in population, an African population, where drought and famine were relatively frequent. Not dramatically like in Sahel, because we are many kilometers lower, but the problem of scarcity of land, of water resources is at several months of the year dramatic. So I began to think about not only natural hazards, but about catastrophes in general. And why hazards are not exactly adequate? Because I think it's a too large, too englobant term. And hazards doesn't permit, when we translate it to French, to have all the nuance necessary to cope with an analytical framework. Well, because my method of coping with hazards and catastrophes, we translate hazards by risk mainly. But in an analysis of catastrophes, the risk is only the probability that an event will occur. But the catastrophe and before and after the catastrophe is also of our concern, and the relief methods, and these are questions where geographers should be well trained, because they can analyze, if they are well trained, the natural and the social aspects.
I was fascinated by your suggestion that geographers could possibly give a picture of vulnerability, population vulnerability. Have you gone further with that idea?
Yes.
Since you wrote that article?
Yes. It's an idea in my mind. It's a half geographical and a half anthropological idea, and I am very much influenced by cultural ecology and ecological anthropology about that. Well, I think that the catastrophes are when earthquakes or droughts are produced by the combination of natural phenomena. It can also be modern pollution, like Bhopal, with killing gases.
Uranium carbide, yes.
Yes, uranium carbide. And the social structure of a society puts some of the members in a more vulnerable position. So we see that with increasing population and with the problems of inequality, the most poor people are generally who are most vulnerable and who are not able to cope with the periodical cycles when they occur, like droughts in Africa. And so the analysis of catastrophes is also a device to make sociological analysis.
Yes.
But with this kind of sociological analysis is not possible when we don't take in count the natural factors. So it's a combination, and I think that catastrophes are a whole at the theoretical level, natural, anthropical, like soil erosion, and technological. And we need to develop an integrated framework. And so this paper to which you refer is the first attempt. It will be very schematically, at this moment it was a mise au point, but I am making more research about the catastrophes now.
You also refer to literature from other countries, somewhat more than other French geographers do. You read the English and you read German and Spanish and so on. Do you think that in your generation there will be more openness to what is going on in other countries than the generation before you?
I'm not sure.
No?
I'm not sure. I think ideally geography could also be an exceptionally valuable device to promote cooperation between peoples. Most now, where we have a strong danger of war, it's necessary that the geographers could help humanity to survive, not only against the problems of war, but also with the natural resources and ecological crisis. But I don't think that in the moment when we are living in a deep crisis of what is called the Occidental world, when we see that many aspects of the societies are perishing, like mature fruits, but they don't fall, they are perishing sur place, in the place, in the trees. I see most of these things, indicators of this crisis, also in geographical and philosophical thought. Particularly in France, we had, and we have still now, a very strong fight against rationality. A fight against the idea that society can be changed. It has been a very publicitary operation called the New Philosophers, who are sold like hamburgers, and it has created an intellectual vulnerability, you can say, by the widespread extension of what I call the soft thinking, is with losing all the logical exigencies of the rationality.
But isn't the period of the nouveau philosophe over in France?
It reappears in France conjuncturally every time when they need to have some ideological device to fight against the progressist ideas. But I think now it's almost finished as persons, because it doesn't present really theoretical interest.
Join the Rotary.
Oui.
They have joined the Rotary Club.
Yes, yes. No, it's very left, right-wing positions, and it's really soft thinking. But in geography, the training of the young geographers makes that they are not very able to make their own criticism in the field of theory. They are attracted, some who make research, they are attracted by some currents, à la mode, but without many criticism. So the problem is not so much that, for me, I think, that they choose one or another investigating strategy or theoretical basis. What is important is that they are able to ask themselves the questions, and the good questions. Philosophy is not only answers, it's mainly questions, and good questions if possible. And these kind of good questions are very difficult to arise when we have a very low cultural level, which is this that we have now in the cultural level in theory, in philosophy. I suppose that the young geographers now have a good cultural level in geography, but I hope. But in philosophy, there is no obligatory courses in history and philosophy. Only few universities give it, and epistemology is an unknown word for many of them. And it's not only a French problem. I think it's also dramatically the case in Belgium, and in Germany it needs a more carefully analysis, because they have another kind of tradition. But in France, the couplage, the coupling of history and geography accapares all the attention in other fields with history.
Yes.
There is a kind of the time devoted to study, it is very difficult to make a solid training in philosophy. And very few philosophers, like in my case, are transferred to the field of geography.
It's an unusual kind of transfer.
Yes.
Yes, and I know you have some very interesting projects on hand there at the Center of Epistemology. In a word, Danielle, how do you see the future of geography for the generation that are now students? In France in particular, or in general?
Well, in general, I think if I put myself out of the field, what I can do maybe in 3 or 4 years, I will not be able to make this ethnological distance. I think that we must, as philosophers, stay firmly in the twine aspects of the discipline, the two dialectics, dialectic of the nature and dialectic of the society, and we must work hard in the interactions. If we don't do that, if we try to follow all the disciplines, fashionable disciplines, we are exposed to do bad sociology, bad geology, bad climatology, and geography will be empty ensemble.
Yes, but in that interaction you would do it in a very rigorous, integrated way, you would say. Take a systems analytic approach. You wouldn't be so much in favor of case studies as were done in the past.
Yes, case studies also. We cannot do good theory without excellent case studies. But we cannot stop, exactly as in cartography, the geographical work begins when the map is finished.
Yes, it should raise questions.
Yes. The study cases raise questions. The geographer must try to solve them and not to stop being afraid to raise difficult political, sociological, epistemological questions. I think geography, like all the disciplines who are concerned with the social reality, is very hazardous.
Yes, in the English sense of the term.
In the English sense of the term.
On a eu des avatars.
Voilà.
Okay. Well, Danielle, I'm very grateful for this conversation, and good luck on your epistemological as well as your empirical interests.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for speaking with me today.
Thank you.